is sending distress signals. Wildfires, droughts, and melting glaciers. Can we reverse the damage? Explore the harrowing effects of climate change. It's a wake-up call. Global emergency. Climate Tracker on WION World is One.
Hello and welcome. You're watching Race to Power. My name is Mohammed Saleh, and on the show today, the question, of course, is this: how successful was Donald Trump's phone call with Vladimir Putin? From claiming during his campaigning days that he could end this war between Russia and Ukraine in just one day of assuming presidency, Donald Trump has now said that he may walk away from the negotiations if progress towards a ceasefire isn't made. In Australia, the Conservative coalition of the Liberal Party and the Nationals has now collapsed. This was the political coalition that had shaped Australia's politics for much of the last century. But how will this impact Australian politics in the days to come? But let's, of course, start with this big story from the United States, where the famous White House fallout with Zelensky, a reconciliation in Vatican, and then a phone call with Putin. The American president is pushing to broker a ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine. So as Trump makes strides to fulfill his poll promise to bring an end to the war in Ukraine, the Americans have opined on his Ukraine policy so far. In a poll that was conducted by the Harvard Capps Harris, 62% of the voters want the United States to continue to supply weaponry to Ukraine and to impose sanctions on Russia. On security guarantees to Kiev, 64% of the voters believe that Ukraine should receive direct security guarantees from the United States, and this is across party lines, with support from 71%, the Democrats 59%, and Republicans at 56%. Now, 59% of the voters believe that Trump has not been tough enough when dealing with Putin and the Russians. Now, 66% of the voters think that the Russian President Vladimir Putin is in fact playing games and is stalling the United States and the West, while 62% of the voters believe that Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky genuinely wants to end the war. Voters, however, are split 50-50 on whether they are satisfied with Trump's negotiations between Ukraine and Russia, with 79% of the Republicans satisfied and 76% of the Democrats and 55% of the independents saying that they're not satisfied. So a total of 1,903 respondents from across the party lines took part in this poll. Now, during his run for the presidency, Donald Trump had repeatedly promised that he can end the Ukraine war within 24 hours of taking office. Last week, he had said that it would not be resolved until he and the Russian President Vladimir Putin can get together and sort things out in person. And it remains to be seen whether a phone call with the Russian President Vladimir Putin can pave the way for peace in Ukraine. All right, now to give us more perspective on this, we are joined by Dr. Charles Kupchan, who's a senior fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations, and he's joining us live on this broadcast from Washington, D.C. Dr. Kupchan, thank you very much indeed, sir, for joining us here on this broadcast. Now, let me actually start off by asking this. You know, all through his days of campaigning, Donald Trump had exhibited a lot of optimism, repeatedly saying that he can end the Russia-Ukraine war within a day of assuming his presidency. Now, in the phone call, that he's had with Vladimir Putin, in your assessment, how much closer are we of Donald Trump being able to strike a deal with Vladimir Putin?
I don't think we're any closer at all. This phone call did not go particularly well. It looks as if Trump is now walking away from playing the role of mediator, as he said he would do over the last few weeks. And he seems to be saying, listen, I've done my best. I'm going to throw it over to the Ukrainians and to the Russians to see if they can make some progress on their own. But clearly, Trump underestimated Putin. I think he thought that he would be able to get on the phone, use his relationship with Putin to convince the Russian leader to end the war. And he's finding out that Putin continues to harbor quite ambitious maximalist war aims when it comes to his aggression against Ukraine.
Now, Dr. Kupchan, and also, how do you think the Russian approach to this war has actually changed, especially when you look at the Russian people themselves, where according to a recent poll, it does appear that the Russians do not look at Ukraine or the United States as their biggest adversaries. That position has now been taken over by nations such as France, the United Kingdom and Germany. Why do you think the Russian attitude towards the United States of America has changed with Donald Trump at the White House?
Well, I think it's obvious that Trump has reached out to Putin. Trump has talked to him on 3 occasions. Trump has sent his Secretary of State and other key advisors to meet with the Russians in various locations. And so I think the Russians now feel that they have in the White House someone who is less hostile, less confrontational than Joe Biden, the previous president. And now you have the British, the French, the Poles, the Europeans, who are really sort of standing on the barricade and saying, no, we need to continue supporting Ukraine for as long as it takes. What Trump does now, whether he increases sanctions against Russia and continues military support to Ukraine, we just don't know. But clearly there is more uncertainty and more fluidity to Washington's policy than there has been during the previous presidency.
All right, we'll have to leave there. Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Kupchan, for joining us with that perspective there. Let's now shift our attention to the other big story that we are tracking on WION. In a critical push to unite a fractured Republican Party, the American president, Donald Trump, in fact, returned to Capitol Hill today, trying to salvage a sweeping tax cut bill that forms the core of his domestic agenda within the United States. Now, President Trump met with the Republican lawmakers in a closed-door session, urging for unity on a massive tax cut plan, an extension of his 2017 signature law. But factions within his own party remain divided, especially over Medicaid, spending cuts and deductions for state and local taxes. Now, Trump has insisted that the Republicans are tremendously unified, but has hinted that any holdouts could face challenges in primary ahead of the midterm elections. Now, the bill proposes to add new tax breaks on tips and overtime pay, which is one of the major poll promises of the American president during his presidential run. The House Speaker Mike Johnson said that Trump's visit was in fact to get everyone in line, and a majority whip Steve Scalise has called Trump the closer, counting on him to sway skeptical members before the Thursday deadline. Now, the American president's visit to the Capitol comes at a time when credit rating agency Moody's has stripped the United States of its top-tier rating. The Republican-controlled Congress has so far backed Trump's agenda without a pushback, but Senate Republicans, including the conservative Josh Hawley, are already showing reservations. With the Memorial Day deadline looming, Trump's power to close the deals in Washington is once again being put to test, but whether he can actually deliver his big, beautiful budget bill is yet to be seen. And to give us more details in terms of what is happening with Donald Trump's big, beautiful budget bill, we are joined in this broadcast by our correspondent Susan Tehrani, who's joining us live from New York. Susan, you've of course been tracking this fantastic, big, beautiful bill of Donald Trump. But there are members within his own Republican Party who seem not to be convinced with certain aspects of the bill. Tell us, what is this controversy about this big, beautiful budget bill that it has gotten into?
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Mohammed. As this bill goes to the House and Rules Committee to sort of hammer out all of the differences between the conservatives and those that are concerned, there is this growing concern that Republicans aren't on the same page. On the one hand, you have a balancing demand with fiscal conservatives who just want to see more cuts no matter what. And then you have the more moderates and a lot of those who have elections coming up in the midterms that ultimately they just do not, notably senators, they just do not want to see a lot more cuts, notably if it comes to Medicare, Medicaid, entitlement programs like Social Security. Now, as you mentioned, while President Trump and his administration say that they're not going to be touching those, they say that there will be cuts, and how that's going to be implemented is through cutting basically Medicare and Medicaid for illegals here in the United States, and that'll save money. But that's where the nitty gritty is. And then the more moderates, they want to see a SALT cap, which is basically a cap on state and local taxes in their constituencies. So those are sort of the things that they need to hammer out. It does appear, on the one hand, President Trump really wants to get this big, beautiful bill across the finish line. But on the other hand, it seems the Republicans and Speaker Johnson is really in a peculiar position. Between now and Memorial Day, which is just a few days away, they have to be careful that more Republicans, even one or two, won't deviate and say, you know what, I'm just not going to agree to this at all. So it's still very fluid.
Indeed. Thank you very much, Susan Tehrani, for joining us with all those details there. Now, not Ukraine or the United States. Now, this is where it gets interesting. The Russians, believe it or not, say that their main enemy in the world at this moment happen to be nations such as France, the United Kingdom and Germany. This is according to a new poll by the Russian Public Opinion Research Center, where 48% of the Russians who were polled now claim that France is apparently Russia's biggest adversary, demonstrating a twofold jump in less than 3 years. 21% believed this to be true in 2022. What is interesting is that the United Kingdom now is in the second spot in the list of countries that are considered to be adversarial by the Russians, with 42% demonstrating it as an enemy, up from 39% in 2022. Now, Germany also features on the list on the third spot, with 41% of those polling believing that the country to be a foe, up from 32% in 2022. Now, the opinion of the Russians about Ukraine seems to have changed in the past 3 years. For now, only about 38% consider it to be adversarial, down from 43% in 2022. Another major change is the positioning of the United States. It topped the list last time with 76%. It's now down to the fifth position, with only 27% considering it to be Russia's enemy. Now, the question of Russia's friends, China continues to be Russia's pick for the most friendly nation towards Moscow, with 65% of the Russians believing this to be true. 41% of those who polled believe Belarus has good relations with Russia, and North Korea and India are on the list in the third and the fourth position. Now, India particularly has significantly strengthened its position in just 3 years, rising from the fifth position to the third place in the ranking of friendly nations, demonstrating a twofold increase in sympathies. And 16% of the Russians also believe that Iran is a very close friend as well, while 11% of the Russians now believe that Kazakhstan is a close and an important ally of the Russians. Now, the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu appeared for a weekly trial for the 33rd time, but before he entered into the courtroom, he was welcomed by the protesters who raised slogans outside of the court. Netanyahu, remember, is Israel's first ever Prime Minister to stand in a criminal trial, and is facing very serious charges of corruption ranging from fraud, bribery and breach of trust in at least 3 separate cases. Netanyahu has denied all the allegations against him. During the hearing today, Netanyahu called out the police and the prosecution for not investigating the cases properly. Now, 3 high-profile cases against Netanyahu include a case that is known as Case 1000 or the Gifts Affair. In this case, Netanyahu and his wife, Sarah Netanyahu, are accused of receiving luxury gifts from billionaires in exchange for political favors. The second case, known as Case 2000 or the Yediot Affair, centers on recordings of conversations between Netanyahu and Anon Moses, the publisher of the popular Israeli newspaper. Prosecution alleges that Netanyahu offered to promote legislation that would weaken a competing newspaper in exchange for more favorable coverage on him. The last one is the 4000, the Bezechwala case. In this case, Netanyahu is accused of advancing regulatory benefits to Shaul Ilovich, then a controlling shareholder of Bezech Telecom. In return, he allegedly received positive coverage in major news websites owned by Ilovich. Netanyahu has dismissed all the allegations and has called the cases against him to be politically motivated and part of a wider witch hunt against him. A day after the Supreme Court pulled up the Madhya Pradesh Minister Vijay Sha for his very crass remarks that he'd made on the Indian Army's Colonel Sophia Qureshi, the state government has now constituted a 3-member SIT, that is a special investigation team, to probe the minister's remarks as per the court's direction. Now, the order to constitute the SIT has been issued by the Madhya Pradesh Director General of Police, Kailash Makwana. The 3 members of the SIT include the Inspector General of Police, Sagar Zone Pramod Verma, Deputy Inspector General Kalyan Chakravarti, and the Special Armed Forces and Superintendent of Police, Dindori Vahini Singh. The 3-member team has been constituted after the Apex Court refused to accept the apology that was tendered by the minister. Now, pulling up the Madhya Pradesh government for not initiating a thorough probe, the court said that the upcoming SIT investigation against Vijay Sha will be a litmus test for the state government. Now, a bench of Justices Suryakant and N. Kotishwar Singh told Vijay Sha that the court has seen the video where he made the remarks and has termed the statement to be a national embarrassment. Now, Vijay Sha faced massive flack after his video surfaced of the minister making very objectionable remarks about Colonel Sophia Qureshi. Now, Colonel Qureshi, remember, had gained nationwide prominence alongside Wing Commander Vyomika Singh during the media briefings on Operation Sindoor. Earlier, the Madhya Pradesh High Court had reprimanded the minister Vijay Shah and had termed his language to be the language of the gutters. The court had directed the police to register an FIR against him under charges of promoting enmity and hatred. The minister had expressed regret over his remarks, stating that he respects Colonel Sophia Qureshi more than his sister. However, the top court has now turned down his apology and has issued directives to the Madhya Pradesh government to immediately begin a probe against him. The Bangladesh Nationalist Party is now intensifying its demand for national elections by December. The party leaders have asserted that the interim government led by Nobel laureate Muhammad Yunus has ample time to implement the necessary reforms and also to prepare for the polls within this time frame. The BNP Secretary General Mirza Fakhrul Islam Alamgir has warned that delays beyond December could trigger deeper political unrest. He's also called on the government to set a clear timeline, a message echoed by leaders from the broader 12-party alliance which backs the BNP. Now, several opposition leaders have urged the interim government to announce a roadmap without delay. They have sought the government to clear the obstacles preventing the BNP and bringing home the exiled acting chairman, Tariq Rahman. However, The interim government's position remains flexible, with Chief Advisor Mohammad Yunus indicating that elections could of course be held between December and June next year, depending on the completion of reforms. Remember last week, Bangladesh Election Commission had officially suspended the registration of the Awami League. Yunus led the interim government said that the ban was imposed in the wake of the ongoing trial against the party over its alleged involvement in the deaths of more than 1,000 people during last year's uprising. In the absence of the Awami League, the main challenger to Khalida Zia's Bangladesh Nationalist Party will be the students-led National Citizens Party. As the political landscape in Bangladesh continues to evolve, all eyes are on the interim government's move and the BNP's efforts to ensure timely elections. A political coalition that shaped Australia's politics for most of last century is now officially over. The Conservative coalition of the Liberal Party and the Nationals has collapsed, and this comes after a stinging election defeat and deep internal divisions. The Nationals leader David Littleproud declared that his party would not be re-entering into a coalition agreement with the Liberals, ending one of the longest political partnerships in modern democratic history. And all this comes just weeks after Albanese's Labour Party delivered a crushing defeat to the Conservative opposition led by Peter Dutton. In the elections that were held earlier in the month, Labour and Albanese won 93 seats. The coalition fell to more than half seats behind at 43, and the Greens party managed only one seat. The Liberal and the National parties have governed together for much of the past century, often referred to simply as the coalition. While there have been short-lived splits before, this one coming amidst shifting political dynamics. Since 1949, the coalition has held Australia's top office for about 50 years during different intervals, with the biggest stretch of 23 years starting from 1949 to 1972. Announcing the split, David Littleproud called it healthy part of democracy, but for Australia's Conservative opposition, the long-standing force known as the coalition may now be a relic of the past. The race for Poland's presidency is heading into a dramatic final stretch, with the voters set to return to the polls on the 1st of June for a decisive runoff. In a surprisingly tight first round, Warsaw's mayor, Rafał Trzaskowski, edged out a narrow lead, capturing just over 31% of the vote. And close behind him with 29.5% is Karol Nawrocki, the right-wing candidate backed by the populist Law and Justice Party. What's at stake is more than just a ceremonial title. The outcome will help determine whether Poland continues on its path towards rebuilding democratic institutions and also aligning more closely with the European Union, or pivots back towards the conservative nationalism that has dominated its politics in recent years. Trzaskowski faces an uphill battle tied closely to Prime Minister Donald Tusk. His campaign is weighed down by a reform agenda that's faltered since last year's parliamentary victory. Meanwhile, Nawrocki's strategy is straightforward: consolidate support amongst the voters frustrated with the current government and skeptical of European Union. So with both sides locked in a near dead heat and the political future of one of Europe's most pivotal countries hanging in the balance, all eyes now turn to the runoff. Poland votes again on the 1st of June. All right, let's also now take a quick look as to what else is making headlines in the world of politics. In Washington, a controversial diplomatic appointment is now official. The U.S. Senate has confirmed that Charles Kushner, the father of Jared Kushner and a recipient of the presidential pardon from Donald Trump, is the new ambassador to France. Now, Kushner was convicted in 2005 for witness tampering, illegal campaign contributions and tax evasion, but he was pardoned by Trump in 2020 during his final weeks in the office. The Senate has confirmed Kushner by a narrow 51 to 45 vote. The Democrat Cory Booker of New Jersey broke ranks to support the nomination while the Republican Lisa Murkowski of Alaska has voted against it. The overseas voting for South Korea's upcoming snap presidential election began today with 223 polling stations set up across 118 countries, accommodating more than 258,000 eligible voters for over the next 6 days. In Japan, 7 polling stations have also been established in major cities including Tokyo, while China is hosting 10. The first overseas vote was cast by university students at the South Korean embassy in New Zealand's Wellington. The election, scheduled for the 3rd of June, comes after the Constitutional Court had removed the former president Yoon Suk-yeol from office. With the 2026 parliamentary elections on the horizon, the political tensions in Armenia are escalating. Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan faces a mix of foreign policy backlash, waning public support and a resurgent opposition. Pashinyan's push to normalize relations with Azerbaijan and Turkey is likely to take center stage in the lead-up to the 2026 elections, with opponents accusing him of betraying national interest. And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of Race to Power. Thanks for watching.
The stress of our world can take a toll on our physical and emotional health. Here, in New York's Catskill Mountains, lies a luxurious place of healing called WION Wellness Center. The WION Wellness Center provides 500,000 square feet of natural methods to manage diabetes, hypertension, chronic pain, obesity, depression, anxiety, and other conditions. We use the traditions of centuries-old natural science from India, yoga, Ayurveda, acupuncture, and naturopathy in personalized programs that help you take charge of your own health. A minimum 5-day stay is recommended for best results. Book now at yo1.com.
The Earth is sending distress signals. Wildfires, droughts, and melting glaciers. Can we reverse the damage? Explore the harrowing effects of climate change. It's a wake-up call. Global emergency. Climate Tracker on WION World is One.
WION, India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide, because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION, World is One.
Ready to dive into your daily dose of news?
Bringing you what's trending in the West and all that's setting trends in the East.
And all of this served up with a side of insightful banter.
We don't just bring you the latest stories.
We bring you your talking points for the day.
And while you do that, from the busy streets of New York, I will provide you with deeper insights on the developments through the course of the day in the U.S.
The show that keeps you ahead of the global curve. A conversation you'd want to be a part of. A place where news becomes an engaging exchange.
We bring you stories that impact your present.
This is World DNA. Join the conversation.
From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening, as we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch.
Hello and a very warm welcome. You are watching WION Fine Print. I'm Molly Gambhir. We are starting off with a quick look at the top stories making headlines. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio insists that President Trump has offered no concessions to Putin, rejects criticism over the administration's Ukraine policy at a Senate hearing. Indian Army showcases some of the weapons and surveillance systems used during the recent offensive against Pakistan. China says it supports Pakistan in defending national sovereignty and territorial integrity. This as Pakistan Foreign Minister held talks with his Chinese counterpart in Beijing. Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei voices doubts over whether nuclear talks with the US will lead to an agreement. This as Tehran reviews a proposal to hold a fifth round of negotiations. Israel says external pressure will not change its course. This after Britain paused free trade talks over the war in Gaza and leveled new sanctions on settlers in the occupied West Bank. Taiwan's president says he is prepared to talk to China as equals, but will continue to build up its defenses as he marks his first year in office. And the Indian Premier League final has been shifted to Ahmedabad from Kolkata. The title clash will be played on June 3rd. startling details have emerged in the ongoing investigation into the Pakistan espionage network. And in the eye of the storm is the Pakistan official, Danish. He was employed with the Pakistan High Commission in New Delhi. Let's just first tell you about the visa bribery trail under the scanner of the Indian agencies. Inside details of the investigation so far revealing Danish was taking bribes of about 5,000 rupees to speed up visa applications. However, he did not collect the money directly. Instead, he used another person, Yamin Mohammed, as his henchman to handle it. Yamin would find people who were applying for visas at the High Commission and would tell them that their visa would be processed faster but for a price. Yamin then passed on the money to Danish or handled it as Danish told him to. And one of the key suspects in the visa bribery and espionage case is a woman named Ghazala, who was arrested from Punjab. And Ghazala's connections to Pakistan came under scrutiny after intelligence agencies intercepted communications linking her to Danish. Her passport and visa documents, now in the possession of investigators, show the official seal and signature of Tariq Javed, visa attaché at the High Commission of Pakistan in New Delhi. In fact, she travelled to Pakistan twice in February and March. Mobile communication records showing that Danish was in frequent contact with three individuals, Ghazala, Yamin, and an Indian citizen named Jyoti. These exchanges reportedly happened over WhatsApp, Snapchat, and regular voice calls. Sources telling WION that the calls were made using a mobile number ending in 8939, which is registered to the Pakistan High Commission. And this detail has become a crucial piece of evidence, further making it a watertight case against Danish and others accused. India thwarted Pakistan-sponsored terrorism. In its Operation Sindoor, it sent out a clear message. The operation, one of its kind, saw unmatched coordination between the Indian Armed Forces, Navy and the Air Force. One of the most intense shellings witnessed along the LOC. WION Siddhant Sibal visited the front lines where the Indian Armed Forces remain vigilant, fighting tooth